In the land of Bala, there lived a king named King Uche. King Uche ruled the land of Bala for more than 40 years. He was a warrior king who had fought in many wars for his village, and because of that, he was greatly feared and respected by his people and the neighboring villages. Aside from being a fierce and feared king, King Uche was one of the best and kindest kings to rule the land of Bala. He served his people with all his heart and ensured that his kingdom never lacked. Unlike kings from the neighboring villages who married numerous wives, King Uche only married one wife, Queen Uzo, whom he loved so much. He knew marrying more than one wife would hurt Queen Uzo, so he made her a promise right from the early stages of their love. After the first 5 years of their marriage, Queen Uzo bore King Uche a daughter whom they named Ngozi. And 3 years after Ngozi was born, Queen Uzo bore another daughter, Ama. Unfortunately, when Ngozi was born, she was born with a sickness that caused her to grow faster than her peers. When Ngozi became a teenager, she was more grown and looked more mature than people who were 30 years old. She was very tall and began to develop muscles and grow a beard. By the time Ngozi clocked 15 years, she looked like a giant with well-developed muscles and a full face of beards. Because of her size and looks, Ngozi barely made any friends. If she walked through the village or were to leave the palace, the villagers of Bala would stop and stare at Ngozi in a very disgusting way. Other children who were supposed to be Ngozi's age mates would laugh at Ngozi and tease her for being different. They also gave Ngozi many nicknames. To some villagers, she was known as the woman man, and to others, she was known as the giant princess. Even though some of the villagers had given Ngozi different degrading nicknames, some villagers began to spread rumors that her father, King Uche, had offended the gods, and that's why the gods punished him with a beastly child as his first daughter. Because of the mockery and teases Ngozi got from the villagers of Bala, her parents, the king and queen, were forced to withdraw her from the public primary school she attended, and she was homeschooled. From that teenage age until Ngozi became an adult, she remained in the palace and barely went into the village because she feared how the people would treat her. While Ngozi spent her teenage years hiding within the palace walls, her younger sister, Ama, lived a free and normal life. She was a beautiful princess, free to go anywhere without fear. But despite being as free as a bird, Ama was intensely jealous of her older sister, Ngozi. Ama hated how their parents always treated Ngozi like she was so special. She detested how much love and attention her parents showered Ngozi, so from a young age, she detested the sight of her older sister. Because King Uche was unable to have a male child after trying for so many years, he decided that his first daughter Ngozi would succeed his throne. But for Ngozi to succeed his throne, Ngozi had to marry first, so she and her husband would jointly rule the village of Bala. Unfortunately, as Ngozi grew older and developed into a mature woman, she found it very difficult to find a man or a lover. Because of her height, size, muscles, and face full of beards, no man in the village of Bala wanted to date or even marry Ngozi. They were all intimidated by her size and innocently believed that since Ngozi was taller and stronger than them, she would act like the man in their marriage. Several times, King Uche tried to arrange a royal competition for men from far and wide to contest so that the winner would get Ngozi's hand in marriage, but none was successful. Each time the men from neighboring villages heard that they were about to be betrothed to the king's ugly and giant daughter, they would all black out. On her own, Ngozi also tried to get friendly with the men in the village, but no one even wanted to be her friend. Sometimes, to win their attention, Ngozi would show them kindness and give them gifts or anything they asked for, but some men would disappear after they got whatever they wanted from her. As time passed and King Uche grew older, he became very worried for his daughter and her inability to find a husband. But because he understood that Ngozi was different from the other women in the village, he knew better to be patient with her. Without being constantly reminded, Ngozi knew that her father and his kingdom depended on her to get married so she could succeed her father's throne. And anytime Ngozi thought about her inability to find a man or even make friends, she would lock herself up in her room and cry till her face turned red. She also hated looking at herself in the mirror because each time she did that, it reminded her how much of an abomination she was. As if being different from the rest was not enough, Ama, Ngozi's younger sister, made life a living hell for Ngozi. Out of envy and jealousy, Ama would constantly remind Ngozi that she was the ugliest girl in the village and she would never be married because no man in his right senses would marry a hideous creature like her. Each time Ngozi heard her sister speak meanly to her, it broke her heart and she would cry her eyes out. Because of Ama's constant abuses and insults, Ngozi began to leave the palace because she could not stand the daily and constant abuses. Since Ngozi was not welcomed in the village and the villagers always treated her rudely, Ngozi found refuge in the forest. In the forest, she had no reason to be ashamed of her looks and wasn't too careful of how she acted. Just for fun, she would name the trees and the flowers, and whenever she was bored, she would sit there and talk to them, then pretend like they were talking back to her. For many years, Ngozi visited the forest every day. If she missed a day with the trees and flower friends, she would apologize wholeheartedly like she were apologizing to a real person. One day, Ngozi was in the forest, walking around and admiring the flowers as usual when she heard someone screaming for help. Without wasting time, Ngozi followed the voice and rushed to the location. To her greatest surprise, she met a man who was being attacked by a wild boar. Unsure of what to do, Ngozi lifted a huge rock with all her strength and flung it at the boar. Startled at what had nearly hit it, the boar sprang away in fear. After the wild boar was out of sight, Ngozi hurried to help the man who looked like he had hurt his left leg. "Thank you so much, brave woman, for helping me. I would have been dead by now if you didn't intervene on time," the man said. "You are welcome. If I may ask, what are you doing all by yourself in this big forest?" Ngozi asked with a smile across her face. "Forgive me. I wandered into the forest on my own. I am not from here, so I didn't know that the forest was dangerous even in broad daylight," the man said as Ngozi helped him up. "Oh, I didn't know you were not from here," Ngozi responded. "Oh, my bad. How do I just address the gorgeous and brave woman who just delivered me from the horns of a wild boar?" the man asked. "I'm Ngozi, Princess Ngozi, the first daughter of King Uche." Ngozi introduced herself properly. Immediately Ngozi introduced herself, the man went down on one knee and bowed his head respectfully. "I've heard so much about you, my princess, and I'm honored to meet Her Majesty in person." The man said, and Ngozi giggled. "Just call me Ngozi, please," Ngozi insisted. Because Ngozi had been trained in herbal medicine, she went around the forest and found some leaves that could help stop the blood from the man's injured leg. After she applied the herbs to his wound, the two of them sat there and talked about the village of Bala for hours. By the time Ngozi had realized what time it was, the sun had already set. So she rushed back to the palace without asking for the strange man's name. It was her first time having a normal conversation with someone who didn't look at her with disgust. And the whole night while Ngozi lay in bed, she kept recounting her happy memories with her strange friend. The following day, Ngozi went to the forest at her usual time. To her greatest surprise, she found the strange man sitting under one of the trees she always sat at. The man claimed he wanted to come back and thank her properly, and then he asked if Ngozi could be his friend. As soon as Ngozi heard that, happiness filled her heart, and she said yes in excitement. She didn't care if she had only known the man for one day. She was happy that someone had finally seen beyond her muscular body and her intimidating height. From that day, Ngozi and the strange forest man became friends, and they saw each other every day in the forest. Because Ngozi was excited to finally have a real friend, she told her father, King Uche, about her friend whom she had been meeting in the forest. When King Uche heard that, he was pleased to hear that his daughter, who was always lonely, finally had a friend who made her so happy and excited, and he asked to see him. To honor her father, Ngozi promised that she would bring him to the palace soon, and by that time, Ngozi had been meeting her friend for months. When Ama, Ngozi's younger sister, heard that Ngozi finally had a male friend whom she went out to see every day in the forest, she became very angry and unsettled. Even though the strange man in the forest was not Ngozi's boyfriend, Ama suspected that he would be a threat to her and her plans. Ama had been eyeing their father's throne, and she knew that the only way she could get it was if Ngozi remained unmarried, so she vowed that her older sister would remain single at all costs. The day Ngozi was supposed to invite the strange man to the palace, she met him at her usual spot. Shortly after they began their conversation, the man proposed to Ngozi, and she said yes. Ngozi had already fallen in love with the strange man, whom she neither knew his name nor his origin. Even without knowing where he was from, Ngozi loved him wholeheartedly, and she was always surprised at how much the man knew her. Later that same day, Ngozi took the man to meet her father in the palace, and her father welcomed him with open arms. When it was time to introduce himself, the strange man introduced himself as Eto, meaning tree. but neither Ngozi nor her father were curious about the origin of his name. When Ngozi broke the news to her father that Eto had asked for her hand in marriage, King Uche was very happy, and he promised to give them a befitting wedding. No one knew that while the discussion was going on in the king's chambers, Ama had been eavesdropping on all their conversation, and she heard that Ngozi had been proposed to. Angered at what she had heard, Ama left the palace immediately and went to her friend's house, whose mother was one of the most powerful and dreaded witches in the village of Bala. She told her friend's mother that she needed a potent charm that would ruin Ngozi and Eto's engagement, and that she needed it fast, so she could destroy their union before it got stronger. This is the end of today's video. Are you curious if Ama succeeded? Subscribe now at our channel and stay tuned for part 2.